I hope you enjoyed part 1 of our interview with Chasity Williams. We're going to jump right back into part 2.
As far as a timeline, trauma it kind of unfortunately becomes a part of you. So it doesn't just disappear. It doesn't just disappear. Now it can be treated, and there's help out there and healing out there. You can learn certain ways of coping in a healthy way to manage your symptoms, to have a good quality of life.
Right.
But as far as the trauma, it doesn't just go away. So I've known people that their trauma happened 30 years ago and they still get triggered, or they may still have nightmares, or there may be certain times of the year that are really difficult for them because maybe that was the time of the year that the trauma happened. So, it really doesn't matter as far as how much time has passed,
Right.
Because your brain and your body remembers all these things.
I'm glad that you stated that, because there might be someone listening that has someone in their life and they feel like, oh, they should be over that by now. That happened so far. That was years ago. Why are they still acting like that it's affecting them? And I think that people need to hear that, those things can affect you in different seasons.
Absolutely. I think, and the reason you bring up seasons, because I think too, as we're approaching the holiday season, I hear a lot too, especially if there's been interfamily trauma, sexual trauma within the family, things like that, different types of abuse within the family, that sort of thing. And then there's family gatherings for the holidays, the expectation that people are supposed to attend, but Uncle Joe molested me and I don't want to be around him. Things like that. That can be very triggering too, as you said, certain seasons. And I think just, especially with the holidays season coming up and those expected family gatherings, that can bring up a lot for people too.
As mental health gains more popularity, we often hear people that might not necessarily have a mental health background. We often hear them say things like, well, this is a trauma response, or they must be suffering from trauma. And sometimes the term is either overused or used incorrectly. So what is and what is not trauma? I think we kind of already touched on that, but for people that are using it in the wrong way or overusing it.
People do define their own trauma.
Right.
But I think to answer that question, as far as what's not trauma necessarily.
Can someone tell someone else that's not trauma? Is that appropriate?
Not necessarily, no. But as far as like your question of what trauma is and what trauma isn't, the only reason I say what trauma isn't necessarily is more so in instances where people do, as you said, like to use certain terms in an inappropriate way, I guess. So trying to think of an example here. I had a bad hair day. Ugh, that was so traumatizing. Yeah. So, silly things, that to me could potentially, not be trauma.
Right.
But as far as, with trauma can be an incident. So it can be something that happened, as you said, something that happened to you directly, something that happened to someone that you love. It doesn't, I always say that people can still be survivors of trauma, even though the trauma didn't happen to them. So if their loved one or spouse had to go through it, that trauma impacts the entire, family or couple or whatever the unit may be, because everyone's impacted by it.
Right.
So it does impact everyone. As I mentioned earlier, in regards to the triggers, it does kind of go under that kind of what is trauma question. So triggers, basically, like I said, they can bring you back to that moment, that time and space. Some triggers can be things like sound. It can be, a sound that may have happened at the time. Like car accidents, for example, you hear certain loud noises, brakes squealing, things like that. It might instantly take you back to that moment. Things like I had a person that I had spoken with before that was abused sexually, and the person always ate a peppermint, and this person never could understand as they became an adult why the smell of peppermint made them nauseous.
Yeah.
And come to find out, once they kind of did a little bit of their own work, come to find out that it ended up being that was a trigger for them, that they at the time didn't even consciously recognize that was a trigger for them.
Yeah.
Certain songs that play, certain touches, certain, places on your body that might be touched, certain types of touching on your body. I could go on, but there's so many different types of triggers, and they impact all of your five senses. So your body and brain remember all these things, whether it's conscious or unconscious.
It reminds me of when I used to be in education, and I would have students that were transitioning from middle school to high school, and they didn't have a really good experience in middle school. Either they were bullied, didn't have a lot of friends, and so starting fresh and connecting with new students was very hesitant for them, because they remembered being rejected, not being accepted, and really struggling trying to be authentically them in high school and find, the people that will accept them and befriend them. And I think sometimes that can be a traumatic experience if you never feel like you belong anywhere. And I think a lot of sometimes students go through that, and I don't think parents are sometimes understanding that having friends and community is a big deal, especially when you're, in middle school and high school. And when they don't have that, that can affect them on a deep level.
Yeah, that social connectedness for sure. And especially at such a delicate developmental age too. Definitely important.
Well, you don't have friends, you just go to school and do grades. No, that's a part of the whole journey through, childhood. Okay. So why do you feel more people don't enter into therapy? What's the hesitancy, do you think?
The stereotype for sure.
Yeah.
And let's be real, sometimes it's expensive. The cost sometimes can deter people.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different services out there that may offer like a sliding scale fee or reduced rate, or some places may even offer free therapy, but it can still be, a deterrent for some people that may not know though, or have those resources. Sometimes people that might be people of faith, they might have that idea of, oh, well, I'll just pray about it and I don't need therapy. And I think that's important because, there's nothing wrong with prayer. I pray all the time, but I think it's important to acknowledge that sometimes you do need more than just prayer.
I have a shirt that says, prayer is a weapon, but therapy is a strategy.
Yes. And I always tell people, sometimes those prayers can bring you to therapy. That therapy might be the answer to that prayer. But I think sometimes people don't realize, the benefit for them. The other thing I think too, when we talk about communities of color, I think is that idea that it's only for white people.
Yeah.
I've heard that a lot, that idea that, because unfortunately, a lot of times in the mainstream media and things like that, that's all you see, that, as far as who's receiving the therapy. Right. Sometimes that may be also what you see in regards to who's providing the therapy. So when you see that, if there's a lack of representation in people of color receiving mental health care, then it becomes this idea that, well, it's not for me, it's only for those people. So I think the good thing is, and I'm kind of shifting a little bit here, but I think the good thing is now that there is more of a narrative out there. The narrative is starting to change in regards to people of color seeking mental health care, and just people in general seeking mental health care, normalizing the importance of mental health care, the benefits of mental health care, and it's become more accessible, as I mentioned earlier, in regards to like mental health and things like that.
In your opinion, as a therapist, do you feel everyone at some point should be in therapy?
Yeah, of course. I think so. We all got baggage.
And blind spots.
Oh, absolutely. So, I think it, as I tell people, our emotions are like a backpack. And, when you think of a backpack, you've got books and shoes and all kind of junk in that backpack, or some people got a big old purse full of stuff. Right. But, when you're carrying that around all the time, it gets really heavy. So when you think about, okay, well, instead of all the books and junk in your backpack, think about all the different negative emotions and traumas and hurts and pains and all these various things that you've been carrying your whole life in that backpack, you're walking around with this heavy bag every day.
Yeah.
And part of therapy can kind of help you to take some things out of that backpack.
Let's talk about self-care. What does your self-care look like?
So I don't watch the news, for one.
I don't either. Carlin keeps me pretty much what I need to know.
I talked about that secondary trauma. Yeah. So I don't watch the news. I'm very careful about social media. I'm very particular on certain pages that I choose to follow. I love me some cute dog videos or pet videos. So usually that's kind of what I like to follow on social media. Really lighthearted things. I'm a runner, so usually fitness and things like that kind of keep me staying active, but running is usually kind of my me time, my time to kind of decompress from the week, leave it on the pavement, and that kind of helps me.
We're here. Talk about running. We're here.
Oh yes. Movies. I mean, just kind of things that keep me, keep my head in a good space.
Yeah.
I will not, I also limit, my exposure to certain topics. So certain types of movies I won't watch if it takes my head into work mode. Right. I won't watch certain types of movies or certain types of shows that may have certain topics. So I'm very particular about that. Creating my own peace is important to me. So not allowing myself to be pulled into other people's drama or issues or negativity, just kind of trying to create my own peace and protect my own energy.
Yeah, sounds like you have some really good boundaries.
Yeah, I have to.
So what does wait, first of all, you said you had some dogs. How many dogs do you have?
I have 3 dogs. 3 dogs and a cat, actually. The 2 dogs and the cat are all elders, so they're my little geriatrics. But yeah, I do have 3 dogs.
What are their names?
Lily, Chloe, and Misty.
Okay. So what does your soul care look like?
Well, definitely prayer for sure. I think it incorporates, my soul care also incorporates with running, because running is my me time.
Yeah.
I'm in nature because me and treadmills don't get along. So I do like to run outside. I'm at peace when I'm, in nature, and I love to see the wildlife if they're not trying to eat me. But definitely when I'm out and I'm running, that's my time to pray. That's my time to reflect. And usually that's when I have my conversations. I have my conversations with God. Hey, God, what's happening? This been going on. So that's usually when I have those conversations, when I'm by myself. And for some reason, usually in the middle of the night. So if I have to get up or something, I'm usually just awake at 4 a.m. and that's usually when I have those conversations too. So, but that kind of is replenishing for me. Sometimes I may listen to like a church service, a sermon, something inspirational with the word. Too, when I'm running, sometimes that's the best time because I don't have those distractions, so I can really focus on whatever the message may be in whatever I'm listening to.
Yeah, I'm the same, Chastity. I just can't put into words what running does for my soul. It is self-care, but it is soul care as well, because I typically don't run with music. And like you, if I am running to something, it's typically a sermon or some type of personal development. And what I recently started doing is walking my dog free with nothing, just silence. And I feel like that's the time that God speaks to me, something, because hey, listen, God, I'm here. What do I need to hear from you. My therapist has me doing some journaling, and that has really kind of slowed my mind down. So I'm really a huge fan of journaling, and just like you said, just kind of trying to quiet my mind and just be in His presence.
Yeah, definitely.
So how do you show up if you've neglected your self-care or your soul care, if that ever happens?
Grouchy.
Yeah.
Definitely grouchy. My fuse is pretty short. I usually feel pretty tired, physically tired, emotionally tired, spiritually tired.
Yeah.
That's usually, yeah, that's usually pretty much it. If I'm not taking care of me, I can tell.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not focused. My concentration is usually off.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to have it. Early in the morning is the best time for me because it allows me to start my day with a win and not have to come home and do something. So yeah. So are you currently taking on any new clients?
A few. I am taking on a few clients, and the reason I say a few is just because my practice is a pretty small practice.
Okay.
Because I do work full time during the day, so most of my availability is in the evenings after work. So, I want to make sure that I don't overload myself, but I also want to make sure that I have the time available for, whatever clients that I am seeing, that I have adequate time set aside for them too. So, yes, to answer your question, I am taking on a few more folks.
Okay. So anyone that's listening to this interview and they're interested in learning more about your services, they just go to your website and fill out a form to get with you?
Oh, yeah. Website has a lot of information there, a lot of great things there. They can fill out the form. My phone number is listed on there as well. So they can, leave me a message or send me an email, however they want to do it.
Agreeing to this interview. Is there anything that we did not discuss that you wanted to touch on?
No, I think we covered it all.
Well, we didn't cover it all. We covered it all for this interview. I'm hoping I can bribe you to come back and talk more about some of the other services, especially the grief one. That grief has so many different layers. And I just kind of want to touch on that more if you have time in your schedule to do that. Thank you so much for taking time to come on and talk to us about trauma. And we look forward to hopefully hearing from you again. Well, that wraps up part 2 of our conversation with Miss Chasity Williams. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give us a like and make sure you have subscribed to the channel. Thanks for watching.